Hi, welcome. We're so glad to have you here, and thanks to Billings Works for thinking of us and allowing us to host. I am the Chief Experience Officer here at Altana Federal Credit Union, and so my teammates and I handle a lot of the people side and the connection out into the community, and also professional development and engagement with our entire employee base here at Altana, which has grown exponentially in the last 10 to 20 years. I've got a ton of teammates here. Back there, you guys can raise your hands, and they can answer anyone. Raise your hand, Scott. Raise your hand. Okay, yeah. I've got a ton of teammates here who could answer any of the questions that we're talking about today. So feel free to follow up with any one of them after the panel too, and me if there's more questions that you need answered.
Hi. Hi, I'm Mariah Carpenter, and we own small businesses in Billings. I own Black Dog Coffee House, and then I am Operations Director for Sanctuary and the Joy of Living.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Michael Sanderson. I'm president of Sanderson Stewart. For those of you who don't know, we're a professional services firm in the community planning and design space. We're engineers and landscape architects and a variety of other related professionals. We are a 53-year-old company, but I'll tell you that we've reinvented our company a couple times, and we'll probably talk today about how it's probably time to do that again because of how things are changing. We've evolved from a local Billings firm to now having 4 offices in Montana and Colorado, as well as remote employees in multiple other states, and so very much in that kind of in-between world of having traditional offices and virtual employees and living with that change that brings right now on top of all the other change that we're experiencing. So that's a little bit about us, and looking forward to talking about culture and engagement.
Awesome. So just as we kind of get going into this, I'd like to start off with, what does culture mean to your organization, to each of you guys, and also like describe your culture in one word. And so I'll start off with Megan. Big question.
Oh boy.
Megan.
Yeah, dang. You know, I wish like all 91 of our employees were here, because they could probably answer this question better than even I could. Culture for us is ever changing, and it's really dynamic. And one thing that we've tried to do at Altana over the course of the last 5 to 10 years is really make our brand about our culture. So our culture is our brand, and our brand is our culture. There's no one sector where one stops and the other begins. They're all together, and so really the people and the relationships that we have with one another and how we do things around here is really how we would define probably our culture.
And what about for you, Mariah?
One word would probably be cared or caring. I think that for us, I asked our team, I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing, it's really fun. And one of their responses was really awesome, because she wrote, I work here because I have an amazing team with me who love equally what I love to do as well. So it's a shared experience. They love to do it together, and they want to do it well.
I don't know that I can describe it in one word. I'm sorry. I'm going to break the rules.
I didn't either, so.
Yeah.
I took it very
because
literal.
I think everybody experiences our culture from wherever they come from and wherever they're at. So I think it's hard to describe it in one word, because if I asked all of our employees, they may have a different part of our culture that resonates with them more. The title of this Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast, which many people have stolen and used over the years. I think Peter Drucker was the first one to actually use it. For us, that statement kind of suggests that culture and strategy are two different things. And I think culture is our strategy. So I think it's very much, we take very much a culture first approach to business. And so, how people experience that, like I say, I don't know that I could put that into one word, but I'd say culture and strategy are one and the same thing as far as we're concerned.
Michael, I'd like to continue on that. You mentioned in your introduction about Sanderson Stewart changing and kind of restructuring and pivoting. Do you mean that in terms of a business sense as well as a culture sense? And I know since you've spread out of Billings too, and the competitiveness of civil engineering, talk a little bit more about that and what that means for you guys.
Well, I think how changing in so many ways. So I think with respect to this, I think we're having a fundamental kind of reevaluation of what the role of the organization is and what the role of the firm, is in the lives of our employees, and what that role needs to be to support and grow and retain and attract talent and all those things. Whereas we talked about this a little bit in our call a couple weeks ago, that people used to have all sorts of social structures in their lives, whether that's the church and the Elks Club and all these different organizations and things that people participated in, and that's where they got a lot of the social support and just things that you need to thrive as a human. And participation and membership in those types of organizations has just plummeted. And so in many cases, people are looking to the firm, to the company, to the organization they work for support in things from mental health to, you name it, that was just not something we even talked about as something that we had to worry about as an organization even a few years ago. And we're having the conversation that, we can lament that and, hope for the good old days to return. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that's the death of an organization if we don't just recognize that the role of the organization needs to change. What does that look like? I think that's what we're trying to figure out. And how do we support our employees in ways that we never anticipated we would need to do even a few years ago.
Can I piggy off of that? Yeah, the Q12 survey that was brought up earlier today, Altana does that. In fact, we have our Q12 survey sitting in the inbox of our employees this week to complete. And one of the questions on that survey is, do you have a best friend at work? So it's 12 questions, and one of the questions is, do you have a best friend at work? And that's always like a stumper for everybody, because they're like, no, my best friend from 3rd grade doesn't work with me here, and that's not really what we're asking in that question. What that question is probing for is, do you have someone with whom you can confide in at work? Do you have a trustworthy person at work? Do you have somebody who cares about you on a really deep level? And if you're having just a crap day, you can walk into their office, shut the door, and and let loose, right? That's really what that question is asking. And so the psychosocial side, I think, is falling on the employers a lot, like it or not. That's the reality of it. And how are we fostering as an organization that psychosocial component on behalf of our employees so that they feel a connection to the people who are sitting to their left and right, more than just a job. We want to make it hard for people to leave because they've got a buddy at work that they look forward to seeing when they walk in the door every morning.
Those things outside of pay, outside of the basic needs, you're seeing those rise to the top of, you mentioned mental health, I'm hearing flexibility, I'm hearing many other things. What have you guys and I'll pose this to the group, what are you guys offering that is a value add in terms of that to your new employees, as well as a retention tool for current employees that make it more of a place to stay and work rather than your guys' competitors?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go first.
We would love that.
Well, it has to be lots of things. So I think one thing is we do talk a lot about culture right from the start. And so our culture guide and I've just been, and I'll talk about that more later maybe, but we start right out in the recruitment process talking about our culture and our culture guide and those types of things. So I think people come to us with some kind of expectation. One of the things I think is really important to create engagement, that stickiness with the organization where a couple dollars more an hour isn't going to make me leave, is those relationships and the people and the other things we do, from whether it's supporting their career development, continuing education, but creating opportunities for people to create those social bonds with the people they work with, which is getting harder now that we're more remote. But one thing we've got coming up next week, actually, and we haven't done it for a couple of years because of COVID, is our symposium, we call it, which is we shut down the entire company for 2 days. We bring all of our employees from every location to one location for 2 days worth of team training, but it's not really down in the weeds training. It's more about the team building and talking about big picture stuff and trying to create as many opportunities over those 2 days for people to just socialize with each other, so that they have relationships with the people that they may otherwise only see on Teams or on a Zoom call. But now they have a personal relationship with that person. And when you have personal relationships with people, it's hard to leave, right? Because that's that social support network, and that's your best friend at work and those types of things. And so trying to create opportunities that don't feel awkward and forced to create those bonds amongst people is just critically important to keeping people around and attracting their friends and everybody else to want to come work for you.
Mariah, I've noticed at Black Dog, when I go in there, I always see familiar faces, and I don't get that at other coffee shops, and I don't get the same personal feeling at other coffee shops when I go into Black Dog. So how have you guys built that into an industry that maybe does see a lot of turnover with employees?
I think that really going into it with that mindset of they're doing other things outside of being a coffee shop. So if I retain someone for a year, 2 years, 3 years, now going on 4 or 5, it's really interesting because I have that conversation in the beginning. I know that my staff most likely will not be with me for more than 1.5 to 2 years. And I think saying that up front in their interview, talking about it, being like, what would be most impactful for you to learn over the next year while you're with me? And listening to them talk about those things, what their goals are, where they want to be, what they want to learn, and then continually touching base throughout their employment. But I think that has really helped retain people because they know that I care, they know that I'm listening, and then also I'm okay with them leaving. And I think that's the thing. Like, I expect a year commitment from you. And saying that up front, even though 1 year doesn't seem long to someone who's 17, that's a lot of their life. That's a long time. And so I think that listening is the main thing that I can say has made Black Dog a little bit different. And they have wanted to stay, and they do have growth and opportunities. Like, one thing we really want to goal and save up for is to go on a sourcing trip, go see where the beans are grown, have educational things like that. And I think that that would be something that would happen at the 5-year mark of being at Black Dog, which we're creating it. So it's not set in stone, but it makes it fun.
Megan, what about for you guys?
I mean, both these guys kind of mentioned the growth and development aspect of employee retention, and that's really, I think, at the heart of sort of who we are as an organization. I think, the data that we're seeing through Gallup is, indicating that it's a grow me or lose me environment. And so we've got people who join our team who maybe this is their first, like, quote unquote professional, whatever that means, job, right? Or they're joining us from a fast food employer prior to this. And really, while people are in our care and while they work for Altana, it's our job to just pour into them and hope that, if they leave us, that sucks, but they're going to go on into the community and do greater things. So let's be an incubator of talent. let's wrap our arms around this employee until their very last day with us and just pour growth and development into them. Similar to Michael, we do an all staff development day. You know, we used to shut down our whole branch. Now we do it on in October on Indigenous Peoples Day. So it's just completely, you know, they know what to expect now. They come in. When we very first did it, we made it all about like the member experience and how we're going to serve the member. And now we've sort of transformed that. We certainly have growth and development in terms of how we can engage with the member, but then another part of the day is really focused on the employee themselves, you know, and how they can grow and develop as a person from either a, you know, mental health capacity or, you know, staying physically healthy, you know, things like that. So it's sort of twofold.
I'd like to pose a question to the group. We've heard a lot about what they're doing in their businesses that are outside the box of retaining employees, outside of salary and benefits. What are some of the things your groups are doing or organizations that are doing that you're proud of, that you think you're retaining employees or making it a place people want to work at? And don't everybody talk at once. I'll jump in. I'll be the first. At Buchanan Capital, we're a really small firm. There's only like really 6 of us in the business. And one thing that I've been impressed with is just the family atmosphere that has been created by the Buchanans. I'm obviously not related to them, and has been an unbelievable experience of just being integrated, not only from things that we do outside of work, but things we're doing inside the business that I just feel a part of. And so that's been like a value add, because I was at First Interstate Bank before, loved working at First Interstate, loved the culture, loved the people, but I can just tell when you kind of, everything feels smaller and cozier and you just get that feeling. That's been a huge value add for me, and I think for Buchanan Capital. And reflects to our clients too, right? Because all this drives to the bottom line of, does it make our businesses successful and profitable? That's like the most important thing. And I think we're starting to realize that culture definitely is driving that. But I'm not going to let everybody off the hook, so I still want somebody to answer. Stefan.
I think, you know, I would echo Michael in the sense of an onboarding process. I manage hotels, so it's a lot of hourly employees, housekeepers, food and beverage staff, front desk staff. So onboarding is critical, you know, and setting the tempo, letting them know that, you know, I may not have outstanding benefits for you, but what I do deliver is a culture that you will have a good work-life balance, that you'll love coming to work, and we'll fight for that. So that's big. But I'd say value is probably one that, like, continuously making sure that employees feel valued by me as the head leadership in there, but then every management and supervisor department, that they're continuing to echo that value. And when there's no value placed on an employee, there's no chance of keeping them long term, especially in this industry. But I'd say, so that would be one of probably the top or most critical things that I do. Is I'm very intentional to make sure anybody that works for me knows my intention is that the day you leave here is because you're going to go to a better job for better pay, and you're moving forward in life, not starting over on that cycle. And so if they feel that, I tend to get a lot more out of them in that 1 year time commitment I might get if I'm really fortunate. So
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you do to show value to your employees?
On property level, like with the people in the building, it's visibility. It's touching them. It's you know, you walk the floor up to the 4th floor and you see your housekeeper in their room and you stop in and you say hello. You acknowledge the effort they're putting in. I mean, that's a crappy job and it's hard, right? Like, who wants to clean 10 rooms and 10 toilets every day, 4 or 5 days a week, right? And so the frequent touch, the positive side, and rather than, hey, you didn't do this right, we're not doing this right, it's going in and it's coaching, like she said, rather than managing, it's coaching, saying, hey, this is what I'm recognizing that's not being done well, and I'm pointing it out to you so that you can then go, oh, I could do my job better. I believe everybody wants to succeed. They don't want to do a crappy job or an incomplete job. They want to do the best of their ability. So rather than pointing it out, I'll go in and just coach them and show. So yeah, I mean, there's probably a dozen different answers to that, but just presence and constant contact is important. And even with the other properties that I regionally manage, I try to scoot in there frequently and eye contact and hello to the staff, not walk right by them and go into the manager's office, that I'm there to see, you know, and touch those team members as well.
Definitely.
I thought I saw a hand.
Hi, Jana Merced, I'm the Director of Honors and Graduate Studies at MSU Billings, and within the last year, I came in to lead a team where the team members had been very much in their lanes, right? You only do these things because you are this person here. And one of the things I did was to institute a weekly meeting where we talk about the things that need to be done this week and some of the things that are on the horizon, and we talk about who wants to do what. And so it's a little bit more fluid, and I've noticed like the amount of work that we're getting done, and you know, just sort of how happy my team seems to be has definitely increased over the past 6 months or so.
One of the things that we did, Matt Weber with Alpha Overhead Door, in our hiring process is we ask them, we call them 5 by 50. What are 5 things that you want to accomplish personally by the time you're 50? And so, I mean, obviously we're hiring kind of a younger workforce in the technician field, and so and what that unconsciously does is when they give that stuff over to you, is what they're unconsciously doing is they're allowing you to hold them accountable to decisions that they're making about their future. Okay, does this align with your goals, what you want by the time you're 50? And they can't give us little things like, I want to be married by the time I'm 50. That's, great. No, I want to own 3 houses on 3 different continents, or something to that effect. How do you then, and that gives you the ability then to hold them accountable to decision-making processes.
Mariah, I think you should talk about how you meet people where they're at, and you ask some of your teammates like, what are your goals? And one of them was like, I want
a bag.
a Coach purse or something. Like, I mean, like, you should talk through that.
Totally. We as owners and managers, my mother-in-law signed us up for this coaching. So I think as leaders, we also need coaching, and we also need things to help us get us excited, right? Like you said earlier, who's taking care of us, or who is that person for us? Things like this obviously are really awesome. But I think that we have a coach. Her name is Virginia. It's for the salon and spa, and we do touch points quarterly with our team. We go over their numbers. This is for commission raises, going over their numbers. There isn't a raise at the meeting, but it's a point where we get to connect with them. So we give them 4 questions walking into the meeting, so they're not just like on the spot, gotta know like these 4 questions. So it's what's going well for you, what are your struggles, goals you have, and then I can't remember the 4th one. Something about education. But it's really cool because they get to come in and they can pick any type of goal. So I was telling them the other day, like an example was a girl wanting a purse, and literally like, how is she gonna do that? How is she going to increase her retail per client ticket, her service per client ticket? And honestly, that's something that drives someone, is they wanted that. It didn't have to necessarily be work related, but they're able to like see that and be like, okay, I want this. It's something ahead of you. Like you were saying, a goal that is obtainable. And I think that having goals that you actually see and they actually win at are huge steps, because then they feel good about it, they tell their friends about it, and they're excited about it. So
That's a good lead into the manager coach review process that Gallup was talking about, and kind of a unique way to discuss, being more than just a manager, being more than just evaluating what they're doing, but how are we coaching them to be a better employee? And so, Michael, started off with you. What are you guys doing with your review process? Is it something similar to Gallup? Is it something that you found that's been really successful in your field? Talk a
I'd
little
like
more.
to say that this is the area that we're just knocking it out of the park, but I'd be lying if I said that. It's hard. This is the hardest, most challenging thing that we deal with, and we are officially have a kind of a quarterly check-in kind of process where each of those is supposed to be focused on a different thing. Everybody's supposed to have a career development plan, and it's supposed to have some annual goals as well as some longer career goals. Each one of those quarterly check-ins is intended. Are we successfully, consistently doing that across the organization? Probably not. Some managers are better than others. Some are great, others not so much. But I don't dispute the numbers at all. That's a big motivating factor in keeping people engaged. Is their manager engaged with them in that way? But I think they're mostly demotivating historically. It's why we've changed our process. We used to have kind of the traditional, way back, the traditional kind of, ratio on these skills and aptitudes from, scale of 1 to 10, and, you go in and tell everybody how poorly they're doing. It's like nobody wants to deliver that or hear it. And so if in that case we scrapped it and said we're better off doing nothing than that, and then have kind of developed this new process that's very much still a work in process, I would tell you.
For us, it is, again, that hopes and dreams. They know quarterly they're going to meet with us. If they have something they want to do, if they want a schedule change, they know they're going to have this meeting. So it's helped other meetings and other things kind of come together, because it's nothing that they're just sitting on for a whole year and then it just kind of implodes one day when they're like, I can't do this anymore, or whatever it may be. It's been a really good way to engage our managers. So Chris and I usually sit down. We do these hopes and dreams quarterly, so they know it's coming. It's going to be at the beginning of a quarter. They get an envelope with that questionnaire a few days before, so they can think about it. They can write on the sheet of paper. They can come to the meeting feeling like they're bringing something. One thing for me is reminding myself to listen. I like to be like, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, you're feeling great. Like, I want to immediately respond for them. So I think that having them come with a list of questions, having a format, and then if you continually do it, just like anybody, repetition and routine, people love. And I think that our team has really, really thrived off of it. They enjoy it. They're coming with more concerns. Sometimes it's not always number and money driven. Like, they really just want to be like, hey, we might need this supply, or this would make our jobs easier. And they're coming with ideas, which I think makes them feel heard, which also gives them purpose. And so it's kind of this whole thing that's unfolding as we do more and more. We're doing, I think, our 6th quarter of Hopes and Dreams now, and it's been awesome.
Can I, before we move on, I mean, listening to you talk, I can tell you one thing about that career development plan that I talked about, the idea of sitting down with somebody and talking about how are you developing, growing in your career. That's the most important thing in those, is an opportunity to sit down, because I think you said, what was it, we're either grow me or lose me. That's a brilliant quote, because I think it's spot on, that people want to see that they're making progress and growing in their career, and if they feel like they're not, they're going to go somewhere else. And so those, whether it's quarterly or however often you do it, that the focus of those discussions be more on that. The performance management piece better be happening all the time, everywhere, right? That shouldn't wait till the end of the quarter or the end of the year or whatever. Performance management should happen when it needs to happen, right? If somebody isn't living up to your expectations, you should tell them right then and there. That's the thing that's hard to get. That's a tough conversation to have, and managers don't like to do it. None of us like to do it. So that's probably the thing that we struggle with the most, is like tolerating poor performance for too long, because you don't want to have that tough conversation. But those conversations need to happen when they need to happen and where they need to happen all the time, right? Not wait to the end of the quarter. When you sit down at the end of the quarter, or whenever that is, that needs to be what she was talking about, that future-focused discussion of, okay, are we growing you in your career and advancing you in a way that works for the organization and is satisfying to the employee? Because that's about retention there.
Right. And I think too, it's nice because it's not like they're coming to this annual review where they're like hoping they get a raise and then they don't. It's not like this like, I'm having a meeting, am I getting a raise? And it doesn't have that because you're doing it quarterly. That'd be awesome if they're getting a raise quarterly. But I think it helps them not be, you just build a better relationship with them and you know what's happening in their lives and supporting them.
I can't really remember what the question was, but
It has been a moment.
I'm starting to forget.
Just
but
go
that's
for
okay.
it.
So management, just sort of in general, I think there's this misnomer that like, it's either top down or bottom up, right? That's like, where you should start up here, and really, I think where you should start is right smack dab in the middle with our middle managers, and we've made, huge efforts and strides around equipping our management team with the skills to do exactly what both of you have kind of, said needs to happen. We drink Gallup like every day. We drink the Kool-Aid. We're a huge Gallup organization. We do the Q12 survey every 6 months. All of our management team has read the It's the Manager book. We've done every other month trainings with our management team about coaching and development. We're currently working with, we're going through, all of our managers are going through a coaching college right now, a quarterly coaching college. And you're seeing that change happen because we can see each other's calendars, and there's one-on-ones that are happening all across the board constantly. You can see it scheduled across the board with folks. And you're exactly right. I mean, if you're meeting quarterly with folks, like I meet weekly with every one of my teammates, and then we have a weekly team meeting. Now, there's 4 of us on my team, so that's a little bit more doable for me. So there's other people who have 12 or 13 folks who report to them. That's not quite as doable for them, but we encourage people to do what works for them. We have accountability buddies just even on the management team. In fact, I met with mine the other week, or last week, and I posed that question because I was like, dude, does it get easier holding people accountable? Because those are the worst, hardest conversations to have. And he really talked me through, that and how it happens and what to do and how to approach those. I mean, really mentored me in that moment. So we have a lot of cross-mentorship and peer mentorship. And peer accountability is a huge, huge piece for us lately as well, so that you're not getting accountability from your supervisor. That's like the only person offering you accountability. There's peer accountability. I mean, the accountability that happens with me and my teammates is more like them holding me accountable, to be completely honest. And I love it, and it creates a safe environment for us all.
The only 2 things I would probably add was the segmenting of performance management and coaching. And I think sometimes it gets a little lost when those are all in one meeting and you're like, okay, raise, performance, also coaching, development, growth, learning opportunities. And if it's all into one, it can get a little confusing, not only for the manager, but also for the employee, because you're sending different signals. And so I thought that was a good point, Michael, of we're constantly evaluating performance. And I think we're all doing that, but it doesn't have to wait till the quarterly or annual. It's just a meeting's on the calendar, so then it's like, okay, then I can have that conversation.
We're all evaluating performance all the time, silently in our head.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't communicate it well to the person who needs to hear it. Like, I'm sitting there thinking in the back of my mind, not saying it out loud, about how, man, that's not what I want to see, or that's poor performance. But then we don't say it out loud in a constructive way, and then we wonder why that person doesn't change their behavior, and then over time we don't have those conversations, and then the individual gets frustrated too and loses engagement because they're not getting the feedback they need. They realize they're not living up to somebody's expectations because they can sense it. People aren't stupid.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes disengaged, and eventually that person self-selects out, and you go, whew, don't have to deal with that anymore, you know, but probably not the best way to have handled that. But it happens, I see it happen all the time.
Yeah, you have to say the
happened to all of
words.
us.
Yeah, you have to say the words. And clear is kind, you know, kind is clear, so,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, there should never be,
Candor is a good thing,
Yeah.
usually.
yeah. And there should never be any surprises, right, ever, in any, you know, annual review. And I think annual reviews in and of themselves, to me, is like really not the time, like you said, to evaluate, you know, performance gaps. You know, it's really about moving forward in the next year.
I think another thing is just being intentional with the coaching and the development. I know at a small firm like ours, we get lost in the day-to-day because there's only 6 of us, right? So sometimes it's like a fire extinguisher putting out fires, and we don't get to the time I get to meet with Todd and Gary. But you know, it's important not only to them and to me that we consistently make time, and good leaders make time for that. And I know a lot of people in this room are already doing that, but kind of something as I was catching on to learn from you guys as you guys are making that time. Also, questions, Marcel's funneling me questions, please just raise your hand too,
So,
or just throw something
This
at me.
whole idea, I mean, pulling this back to kind of culture and the culture it creates, you know, you ask somebody, you know, what does culture mean, or what, to try to define culture, and it's hard. But you can say what you want about what your culture is and put your core values on the wall and all those things. But culture, the real culture in your organization, is what you will, as a leader, will tolerate. Like what you will tolerate becomes your culture. You can say, this is what we aspire to, this is our, you know, aspirational values statement, but then people see you tolerate something different, and that becomes the culture of the organization. Okay, this is what they will tolerate, so that's now the bar, not, you know, and so if you're going to, and I think culture needs to be aspirational, you need to say this is what we aspire to be, and then, which is why we have a culture guide, but then this actually needs to drive your decision making. And the reason it's a culture guide, and it's called our field guide, is so that you can bring it with you to meetings. And everybody has one of these on their desk, and, you know, but it actually needs to drive your decision making. And and culture and values are the same thing, right? Your values drive your culture, and your culture reflects your values. So we used to talk about core values, now we talk about culture. It's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. But if you won't hire somebody, and more importantly, fire somebody because they violated your values, then they're not really your values, right? You say, this is what we value, but we're going to tolerate that guy because he's making his numbers. You know, if you're not willing to fire that high-performing person because they violated what you said you valued, then throw this out the window because they're not really your values. And people are not stupid. They will see what you tolerate, and that becomes the bar.
Yeah, it's a hire slow, fire fast, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the questions, sorry to keep taking this back to the Q12, but one of the questions on the Q12 is, my colleagues are committed to quality work. And that is an accountability question. That is are my colleagues living up to the culture that we say is how we do things around here, or the core values? So it's hiring to core values, and then it's offloading people who, you know, aren't meeting that, you know, or who are going against that core value that you've laid out as important. Because you have this thing like, well, I'm doing my job, or I'm doing what they're asking me to do, and I'm embracing this change, but I've got people to my left and right who aren't, and who are infecting, you know, the team's dynamic, but we tolerate it, and we let those people stay. and that's like a cancer. And that's, you're absolutely right, Michael. I mean, you gotta address that.
And I always find you know who those people are.
Yeah.
If you were to take your team and list them and put A, B, C, D, E players, you're paying attention to those F players. You're giving them all of your time instead of giving it to your A players because you're taking care of these F players. And then you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending so much time on someone that isn't creating the culture that I want, even if they are your highest income producer or something like that? And then you just have to, it's hard. But you gotta
And
let
it's
'em
so
go.
true, man. I used to be a
It's not worth
teacher,
it.
and like your discipline problems would just soak up every ounce of energy that you had in your classroom. And meanwhile, you have like these high performers who are doing their thing, doing what they're being asked to do, crushing it, engaged, and they just don't get any of your attention. And it's a travesty. It's a bummer, you know? And that same kind of dynamic can absolutely seep into just the, you know, regular business world. So true.
We do have a question from the audience, so I'm going to pose this to the group. How do you communicate clearly what a great job looks like to your employees?
I say it.
Start with Mariah, yeah.
I think that literally saying like, oh my gosh, great job, saying it out loud to them face to face. I'm sure all of you have done like what is that? Oh my gosh, I can't think of it. What is it? Your love languages. So finding out what's their love language. Do you do that in your hiring process? Do you learn how they learn best? Things like that. So having information about that person, I look it up. I have like an actual Excel sheet, like how, you know, where are they rating? Like, oh my gosh, she loves acts of service. Let me go scrape her windshield. Whatever it may be, something that relates to them that they're gonna feel genuinely cared about.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, recognition has to be specific, and it has to happen just like a lot. And I think people are like, you know, the old school way of thinking is like, oh, we don't want to tell them that they're doing a good job for just doing their job, right? And I was like, yeah, that really doesn't like negatively impact like anything. Like just like why don't, like, we should just err on the side of over recognizing people. I think that's like a safer bet than never recognizing people. And that's really, I've never been like, I better not say anything this time because then they'll think, you know, they're doing good work just for doing their job. Like, just say it maybe, even if you're wondering, you know. And I think, and catering it to, you know, to the person and individualizing it is important. You do love languages, we do strengths. So Clifton strengths, your top 5, you know, what are your top 5? What do you value most? So if you're in the executor bucket, like getting her done and crossing things off your list, like that's how I'm gonna, you know, recognize one of my teammates, like, dude, you got so much work done this week, nicely done. I've got another teammate who lives in the relationship development bucket. I call her Camp Mom. She's sitting right there, and everybody comes to her because she's one of the most trusted people in this organization. And so if I hear her be able to give, you know, just good, insightful feedback to somebody that develops trust and kindness to that person, I tell her because she's just incredibly good at that. You know what I'm saying? So it's really adjusting kind of what you say to the individual.
So one of the things we do is we call them the Stewies. So lovingly named after one of our founders, John Stewart. We call them the Stewies. And so anybody in the company, it started out with just managers, but now it's evolved to where anybody in the company can nominate someone for a Stewie. And so, and the point is to make the reward small, nominal enough that it's not a huge expense, so we can do these all the time. And so you have to write out what you're nominating this person for. So they went above and beyond to help me out with something, or they did a great job on this or that. I mean, it's all over the board. They helped me clean up the break room. You know, I mean, it just can be anything. And they turn that in to Amy and HR, and they get a little plastic trophy that's like this big, and $10? $10. It's a $10 bill and a plastic trophy. But then I think the more important thing is I send out mostly weekly email, all staff email with stuff that's going on And once a month in that email, I put every one of those Stewies, who got Stewies, and what the person wrote as to why, to celebrate, like, this is what being a successful person at Sanderson Stewart looks like. You know, it's all these little things, you know, and sometimes they're big wins, sometimes they're literally cleaning up, you know, or whatever. But you put all those things out there for the whole world to see. And, you know, congrats to everyone, and, you know, thank you for your example of, you know, what that means. And so the reward is nominal, right? That's not the point. It's about celebrating all the little things that make us successful.
That's cool.
I have a question that I didn't give to you guys before, so this is kind of a wild card, but coming out of COVID, what has been the biggest challenge to your culture as an organization? So what's been the biggest challenge, and what are you doing to overcome that, and what do you still have to work on? It's probably different for each business, so I'm just curious and we'll start off with Mariah.
I think mostly is adjusting. We're in the service industry. All of our businesses you come in for, right? So our staff can't work from home and make you a coffee. They would love to, but they can't. So I think that adjusting to maybe their spouses or their child care needs or things like that has definitely been a huge challenge. But I think that listening to them, honoring where they're at, finding out what their spouse is doing so they can move their schedule and we can work with their schedule, and being okay with that. It's the new norm that maybe people only want to work. Because I asked one of my employees, this is a great example, I said, how many hours would you like? They write check full-time or part-time on their application. She wrote like both, checked both boxes. I was like, what does that mean? She's like, oh, I want to work like 28 hours a week. Awesome. Do you have another job? Do I need to work around anything? No. And I was like, okay, so this is like your only source of income? Yes. And that is okay for me to not just like jump on the judgmental side of like, what do you do with all your time? Like, what are you doing? That's what I want to say. But really listening to them saying they want well-being. They want to go to yoga every single day, and they want to be off by 4, and that's okay. And I think for us it was becoming okay with that, because it was hard, because we're people, type A, and we want to drive it home and work all the time, and yeah. So I think it's just being okay with where your team is at. That's been probably the biggest challenge, with just hours and COVID.
Sure. There's a couple things that come to mind. One is, as I mentioned earlier, so much of what makes culture sticky, where people want to be there and be part of it, is the social relationships that they have with people. We're a design firm, so it's very collaborative work. We're working with each other all the time, and that, you know, so you've got this great kind of active social thing going on all the time in the office. We had also just we had just had one of our all-company 2-day symposiums, and which finished on Friday, and Monday was the day we sent everybody home because of COVID, because it was happening kind of as we were having our symposium. And so I really feel like we kind of invested in our culture bank account. At the symposium, we were coming out of that thing on a high, as tight a team as we could possibly have, and then we sent everybody home. And I feel like we've been drawn down on that account for the last 2 years, right? And recognizing that even though Teams and Zoom and all that technology is great, it's not the same. And so we've got most everybody back in the office, but we're still rebuilding that culture. And then at the same time, where every day you pick up the business press and there's another article about how hybrid is the way of the future, and some people just want to work from home forever. And so wrestling with what we know the strength of our culture to be, or what it was, and can we recreate that when we've got a significant amount of our workforce who may not be in the office ever. And so that's a huge challenge culturally. And we've, some have said, well, you have to, let people work remotely if that's what they want. I think that's a cultural decision you have to make as leadership. Is that consistent with the culture you want to create? And if that's what somebody wants, and this is the culture you're trying to create, and they're not consistent, maybe that person's not a good fit with your culture anymore. I don't know where we've landed on that yet. I think it's an ongoing conversation, but I think, every decision you make like that is, I believe every leadership decision you make, every policy decision you make, is either going to positively influence your culture or negatively influence your culture. And that's when I say culture first. You have to say, okay, is this policy or is this thing we're going to do in our organization going to be additive to the culture we're trying to create or detract from it? And so I think that's really hard, and I'm not sure we've come down on that yet. The other thing I'd like to say, we kind of earlier glossed over pay and benefits as like, what are you doing besides pay and benefits to create engagement and build culture? And I totally agree. I mean, pay is, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is kind of hygiene, right? I mean, once you're paid at a level that you feel is fair, it ceases to be a motivator pretty quick. You give somebody a raise and that increases engagement for like 60 seconds. Maybe, right? But it can be a demotivator in a hurry if people feel like they're not being paid equitably with their peers or others. And if anybody's ever seen you can find it on YouTube, the monkeys eating grapes. Have anybody seen this video? Google monkeys eating grapes. Not right now, later. But it's classic. And so it's a real study of monkeys in a cage, and the researcher hands the one a cucumber and he takes it and he eats it. He hands the other monkey a cucumber and he takes it and eats it. So he's feeding him cucumbers. He gives the one a cucumber, eats it. He hands the second monkey a grape. Well, monkeys like cucumbers, but they like grapes a lot more. And so the first one sees the second one eating a grape, and when the researcher gives the first monkey another cucumber, he chucks it back at the researcher. But that's the thing with pay and benefits, is as soon as somebody feels like somebody who's relatively equivalent to them is making more or has something more, all of a sudden pay and benefits is a major source of disengagement. And right now, with what's going on in the labor market, and you cannot pick up the Wall Street Journal or scroll through your media feed any day of the week and not see a story about how pay is going up and this and that. And this generation of the workforce is not afraid about talking about what they make. So they all know. And so, we're out there trying to hire people. You're having to compete in a labor market that I said, this is an arms race for talent. And so people are throwing crazy money at people. All of a sudden, this pay and benefits thing, which has always been important at some level, I feel is just like people are hyper aware of it right now. And almost every week somebody's coming in and saying, well, so-and-so's hiring at this level, and and all of a sudden you got to play that game. So we're trying to do all these things that create engagement and create great culture other than pay and benefits, but you better be paying attention to pay and benefits too. It's both and, I think.
Yeah, hopefully your culture doesn't create a wandering eye. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you
Yeah.
kind of hope for. It's interesting because Gallup's data around engagement really spiked at the height of the pandemic. We saw that trend as well, which was just kind of an interesting thing. And the reasoning behind, I think, some of that is because employers were showing care and concern. And so they were saying, no, just stay home, it's okay. Like, if you can stay home, let's stay home. Altana closed our lobby doors for months, right? And basically what that communicated is, we care about you more than we care about the business and the work. We care about you as people. And then they spiked at the height of the pandemic, and then it dropped and kind of normalized or whatever. And so what I think we're trying to do here at Altana is maintain the level of care and concern, even though we're not at the height of a pandemic, right? So that we're constantly communicating to people, hey, you're whole people. You can bring your whole selves to work. You can bring your authentic selves to work. You got more going on in your life than just this job, and we care about all that too. And we've got a huge level of care and concern for you and just your overall well-being as a person. So it's trying to maintain that element in terms of lessons learned.
I'd like to open up questions to the group for our panelists. Perfect.
I have a question. It kind of goes back to you were talking, Mariah, about having good employees and them only being around for a year. What do you do to celebrate them departing where you're at, assuming they've been a great employee and you would rather not lose them, but you know that that's going to happen? Or do you?
Good. Yeah, so sometimes in our social media, I'll tell them what they're doing. We had our very first manager at Black Dog, amazing. Her name was Michaela. She still comes by. She still will come and help do our deep clean quarterly. Like, she's just awesome. She still comes in. But she was going to nursing school. And I wasn't going to say, you should work at a coffee shop, not go to nursing school. And I think that it was celebrating that and saying, like, we're so happy for her as a team and as a culture that we're seeing the people that we employ grow. I think that having an employee leave that is sad or upset or, not departing well is far more hurtful than having an upset client. Because they're constantly telling that story about your culture and who you are as a business. And I like to think of my employees as my customers, and then the customers are their customers. And I think that celebrating their wins with them and being happy for them, and she'll literally, like, still to this day, if it's like crazy and everybody asks for the exact same day off, she will come and cover, even though she's a nurse. Like, I think that having that care for them and being excited for them makes all the difference.
My daughter worked for Mariah for
4 years.
through high school not at the coffee shop,
Yep.
at Joy of Living, and she came home I think last Christmas and helped
Yep.
worked for
During the
them
Christmas
through the
rush.
Christmas rush to help them out. Still comes back. And
Yeah, she's awesome. We need more queens.
I'm going to target this one to Megan because I think anybody that has at least one good eye knows that this company is thriving in that culture department. And I would just side note, but if I could summarize it in 3 words, I'd say ice cream van. I just think it's really evident with what you guys are doing in the community, and that you're really putting a lot of effort into culture for a credit union in the banking industry. So my question would be, how do you, and you're probably not the final authority on your budget lines.
I wish.
How do you find that balance? What determines how much money you can spend in this category of developing culture and still justify it versus labor and all the other expenses that go in, so that you're still profitable but saying, hey, this is an expensive category if you really want to excel in culture. I mean, there's little things we can all do, but you really want to take a bite out of it and change your culture to some extent. It's not an inexpensive process, and it doesn't, on paper, probably show an immediate return, right? So.
Well, I mean, it's a lot more expensive to lose an employee and then re-onboard a new one. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. you know, the bus is what they're called now. I used to call our VW bus a van, and I was schooled on that in the course. I know more about VW buses than I ever thought I would ever need to know. But yeah, I mean, the bus is like this fun, sort of like sexy fun thing that we have that sort of like can, you know, rope people in if they scope out social and all of that. But once we get them here, it's onboarding, it's making sure that that they don't get a wandering eye. And, you know, we're spending a heck of a lot more money around, you know, development than probably we have historically. I always tell Jason, our CEO, I'm really good at spending money. And you just make the money, and I'll spend the money. And it's just pouring it back into our people, because, like I said, you know, it's what's it going to cost us? Well, what's it going to cost us if we don't do this? Because we're just going to have a ton of turnover, and we put numbers to it, and it is really expensive for us to onboard people. I mean, we're employing, you know, 3-4. You know, not cheap positions to be able to onboard people every time. There's a cost to that too, and it's far exceeds what we're spending per employee in terms of professional development throughout the course of any given year.
See, I don't think culture needs to be expensive at all.
Yeah.
So I think if the solution is to throw money at it, that's probably the wrong approach. I think culture reflects leadership, and it takes a relentless focus from leadership on what you want your culture to be. Communicating it till you're sick of hearing yourself talk about it, communicating it everywhere, every chance you get, doing little things like, you know, 10-cent plastic trophies are more important than paying some vendor to come in and do, you know, for some wellness app that 10% of your people will actually ever use. You know, I think it's about an absolute relentless focus from leadership on reinforcing that culture every chance you get. I mean, talking about onboarding, I spend 1 to 2 hours with every new hire as the CEO. Like, that's a crazy amount of time. But I spend that whole time talking to every new hire, no matter where they're at. They could be at the lowest rung on the totem pole. I spend at least an hour with them talking about the history of our company and how our culture came to be and what our culture means. But that's an investment in time and energy. But it didn't cost. I'm not chargeable to projects anyway, so. But I think that it is about an unrelenting focus on what you want your culture to be. It doesn't need to cost money.
I think it's a both and. I mean, you got to put your money where your mouth is, and so I
True.
agree with that. You know,
I mean, it doesn't need to. I don't
Yeah.
think it needs to be a
Yeah.
massive line item in your budget.
Exactly. I don't tell my boss that, okay? But but I do think it's a both and. I mean, development costs money. I mean, whether it's your time or our director of training's time or whatever.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
you've got to have the structure in place to really back up what you're saying you want to aspirationally, where you want to aspirationally go. But yeah, culture's a million different things that happen in any given day to help feed the definition of how we do things around here. You know what I mean? So, for sure.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I do have one final one for our panelists, and want to say thank you for the wonderful conversation and just your guys' time. What's one item you would want everyone to leave with? The one thing that I know we've talked about a lot, so that's hard. I kind of asked this question at the beginning, describe culture in one word, but what's one thing you would want this group to leave with today on culture? And I'll start with Michael.
Wow.
Isn't that on the spot so hard?
I know. Well, I don't know, one thing. Culture reflects leadership. And for all of us here who are leaders in our organizations, people are watching you. And if there's a disconnect between actions and values, they will witness it, and they're watching you. And so, what you need to be crystal clear in your own head about what you want your culture to be, and make sure you're living that every day, because people are watching and analyzing and everything you do and everything you say, and your culture will reflect your leadership.
Can I just say yes? So good. I think that it's exactly that. It is literally knowing that they are going to be reflections of you. Your managers are a reflection of you, and what they see you do and what they see how you act is exactly what they're gonna understand as being okay and what your culture is. So I think that setting a good example and starting it off from the beginning. You can't go back with an employee. You have to start those things first day, day one. How were you greeted when you came into your business? That's probably a reflection of how the entire company is, even if it's just, someone standing at the front desk. That's your initial reaction to the company's culture.
My thing would be, don't get discouraged, because I think when you're doing culture work, a lot of the time you're like, thunk, 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 thunk. Like, is this thing on? Like, is anybody hearing me? Is this working? It's like watching a pot of water boil, and you're just like, oh my gosh, is this change ever gonna happen? And then you look back 5 years and you're like, oh dang, like, we've done some stuff. Like, we've made some changes. This place is different than it used to be, 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. It's really about the process. And I think impacting culture is more about consistency than it is about flashiness. So like I said, the bus is this flashy, fun thing that maybe helps us, grab people in. But it's really the consistency that we display over the course of their time with us to help feed that culture that makes more of a difference than anything.